Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history for Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and our guest today for the second time is Dr. Denton Croyle, who is speaking not only for himself but also as the historian for the First Mennonite Church in Wadsworth. We tried to get all of the things that he knew in the last program, which was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but if anyone knows Dr. Croyle, he knows so much that it's impossible to get it into just one program. So I invited him to come back so that he can give us a little bit more of the history of the First Mennonite Church and perhaps to give us a little bit more of the understanding of the 3 different kinds of Mennonite churches we have in Wadsworth. And then I've asked him to talk about himself a little bit and also about his family. So, Dr. Croyle, we are again pleased to have you back, but we need to say 2 or 3 things before we start, and that is that you have such a facility for knowledge and such a facility for expressing your knowledge that I find myself sitting back and listening and forgetting what questions you're going to ask. So if I falter there, you wake me up and we'll start right over again. But
Okay.
for the time being, so that people know who you are, tell us a little about who you are, where you were born, and what you do here in Wadsworth, what you did in Wadsworth, and your family, and so forth, and we'll go from there.
Well, Caesar, I'm a Western Pennsylvania boy. As I said that before, I came from a little town called Holsopple, Hollsopple, which is a little rural burg about 10 miles south of Johnstown, southwest of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I grew along US Route 219. We weren't farmers. Dad was a thresherman in the summertime and a sawyer or a sawmill operator in the wintertime. And Dad had a thriving business through the Depression years, and I remember it was right during 1932, in the throes of the Depression. He decided to put rubber tires on his equipment, and he put hard rubber tires on the separator, which is a threshing machine, and pneumatic rubber tires with inner tubes on the tractor.
Mm-hmm.
Big Hubert tractor, man. I remember how that thing used to bark.
Oh yes, they're big tractors.
Yeah. And Dad committed himself to a real bundle there, and his plate was pretty full during the Depression. I remember those long brown letters coming from the Hubert Company in Marion, Ohio, and I'm sure they were Dunning letters wanting another payment. And my brother told me just not too long ago that Dad told him that things got so bad that the Hubert Company sent a representative, factory rep, to check out this Lloyd Croyle. And Dad showed him the equipment, what he's done with it. He showed him the list of barns, 85 barns there in central Pennsylvania. And he saw us 4 kids and so on. And apparently he went back to his home office in Marion and told them to keep the dogs off Mr. Croyle. He's got all he can handle. Let's give him more time. And they gave Dad more time, and he paid his bills. Right.
Oh, I'm sure he would.
Yeah.
That certainly is, you know, what they call the Protestant ethic.
Right. Yeah.
And boy, that's the Protestant work ethic. And he certainly would have paid his bills.
Yes, he did. Mother and Dad had 7 children, but only 4 of us survived. They lost 3 babies. And which was sort of the trend in those days.
Oh yes, it's true. Yeah, you were born what, 1921, right?
23.
23.
Yeah,
So
born 23. I was the second son, actually the third. Number 1 died, then my brother survived, and then I came number 3. And I grew up back there and went to high school at Conemaugh Township High School. Conemaugh, C-O-N-E-M-A-U-G-H, an Indian name.
Conemaugh.
Conemaugh Township. And graduated there in '42, and came out right in the beginning of World War II, and was rejected from the military draft. Physical disability, I had a bad hip that would happen because Dad accidentally ran over me with a car in the backyard when I was 10. So that took care of WW2, and when I was rejected from the draft, well, I thought, well, this must be the leading of the Lord. So I decided to go to college. I had a cousin that was there at Goshen College, Goshen, Indiana, our church college, Mennonite college. And I had a cousin there, and she sort of encouraged me to come. And so I always thought that I wanted to be a professional of some kind. And I had a great admiration for my family dentist.
Isn't that something?
Dr. Benshoff, yeah. And
B-E-N-C-H-O-F-F.
B-E-N-S-H-O-F-F.
B-E-N-S-H-O-F-F.
Right,
Benshoff.
Harry Benshoff, yeah. An old graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, and he talked Pittsburgh to me all the time for going into dentistry. And so I got a catalog from the University of Pittsburgh School of Dentistry, and I was out of high school for 2 years working in the steel mill after I was rejected from the draft. And during that time, I saved my money, paid some debts off for Dad. And so in the fall of 1944, I enrolled at Goshen College. And since I was out of school 2 years, I wanted to get into dental school as quickly as possible. And as soon as I had fulfilled the requirements, as soon as I fulfilled Pitt's requirements to get into dental school, I applied and was accepted. And I entered dental school in the fall of 1946. Went there from 46 to 50. Graduated in June 14th, 1950. Met a nice girl from Orville called Mary Schnell, S-C-H-N-E-L-L, and we met at Goshen. And we were wed on June the 19th, 1948, and I took her with me to Pittsburgh, and she got a job in an office there for Standard Brands Incorporated. That's the Chase and Sanborn coffee and the Jell-O people. And she helped pay my bills because by that time I had Dad pretty well strapped because he had my 2 younger siblings in college at that time, and Dad's plate was full, if you allow the expression again. And so Mary put me through school those last 2 years, and we went back to Johnstown to start practice. And we had 2 children born back there. Phil, born in 1951. Phil is today an attorney, graduate of Case Western Reserve Law School. He practices in Boca Raton, Florida. Anne, our second one, that was born in Johnstown, became she graduated from Goshen College as a home economics major. And then she married a young fellow who went to medical school and became a physician. And she and he decided that maybe she would be more helpful to him in his profession if she were a registered nurse. So she went to, I think she went to Akron General, as I recall, and got a nursing degree. And they practiced family medicine over in Manaway in Portage County. Have 3 kids. Then let's see.
We moved to Wadsworth.
Yeah. The Korean War was on. I was rejected in World War II, but I was caught in the Korean War doctor draft. They were drafting doctors, and I went as an objector, and had to get a job, and I was a dentist at a maximum security prison in northwestern Indiana, where they had insane criminals. As a matter of fact, my assistant was a little a little fella, Tommy Geckel. Don't ask me how to spell that, but I know it's very German. To show you the caliber of people that I worked with. Tommy got a girl in the Claypool Hotel in Indianapolis and strangled her and raped her and stuffed her in a chest of drawers in the old unair-conditioned Claypool.
Wow.
Her name was Dorothy Poore, P-O-O-R-E. Being on the staff, I had access to the medical records, and that's how I know all these details. But anyway, Tommy was a bad one. But he was my dental assistant, and we would go over into the maximum security prison, have to be shaken down each time, and so on. So I was there for 2 years, and when I left Johnstown, I gave up my practice. We went through a couple of steel strikes back there, and my little practice just almost dried up. And I said to Mary, let's go somewhere else. So we looked to Wadsworth, and my parents were getting old, and her parents were living in Orville, and they were older yet, about 15, 17 years older than my parents. And so we located in Wadsworth, and I made the rounds of the 5 or 6 dentists at that time.
Who were they?
Well, they were Dr. McRitchie, and
McRitchie.
Dr. Goss. Goss was still here. Dr. Keeler, and Dr. Wursler. And I believe I was probably the 5th one at that time. It was just before Dr. Everhard came in. And I visited the dentist, and save for one, the other fellows all said, come in, we need you. We had this influx of people from New Jersey that came in for B&W and so on. And I've got a list of patients here that I'll give you right now. And they were very accommodating. Ben Ladrick threw a couple of rooms together up there in his building, and I started... On the
corner of Broad and Main.
And Main, yeah. Southeast
corner.
Yeah. And in the fall of 55, then, I started practicing there.
In Wadsworth.
And was there for 10 years. And then Merle Weber prevailed on me to go up the street to 323 High Street to the medical center. And I was up there for 8 years. And then I knew Dr. Keeler, and I knew he was going to retire. So Glenn says, well, Dr. Keeler asked me to make a bridge for him. Fixed bridge. I remember it was down here in the lower right quadrant. I don't know if he wanted to test my dexterity, see whether I had it or not. But anyway, I made a fixed bridge for Glenn, which pleased him because my price was right. And Glenn says, why don't you buy this place, Denton? I said, could I or should I? He said, you could and you should. You should own something. You've paid rent long enough. I was paying rent to Ben Ladrick and to Harry Pappas, those fellows up there. And so one thing led to another, and in January of '74, I bought Dr. Keeler's office.
Which was located where at the time?
177 High Street.
Which is about 1,000 feet north of the intersection of Boyer on the east side of the road.
Well, it was south of Boyer. It was yeah, south. It was south of Boyer, Caesar. Hartman Studio was on the corner.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Maple.
Oh, Maple. Okay.
Between Boyer and Maple.
You're right.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah. So I had a good practice there, and practiced there for about 74, 84, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14 years.
Now, you moved from the criminal type as your assistants to some very nice people as your assistants. Who were some of them?
Ah, boy. My first assistant, Caesar, was George Kraska's daughter. Cute little thing.
Yeah,
Joanne Kraska.
That's a sweetheart.
She was my first assistant, and she worked for me for 2 years. And I had a succession of assistants. Some of them lasted just a couple of months. But the best one that I ever had was Judy Everhard, Fire Chief Everhard's daughter. Judy. Fire Chief Everhard,
yes,
former Fire Chief Everhard.
Judy Everhard had a sister then too, Beth.
Yeah, and right.
just outstanding teacher.
Yeah.
Beth is an outstanding teacher.
Right, and anyway...
I had her as a student at the university.
Did you? Yeah. Anyway, Judy was with me about 14, 15 years, my last years, when our practice was at its peak, and then on the other hand, we passed the peak and we're going down the other side, yeah, Judy and I are still good friends, and we communicate every couple months.
You had some health problems there that interfered, didn't you?
I went through the heart surgery business, the bypass surgery in 1980. Came back from that and practiced 8 more years.
Yeah, good.
And then I retired in October of 88, and was just really enjoying retirement. And then came down with acute leukemia. I shouldn't even be here. You see,
but you are, though.
It's the grace of God.
Of course, we're all here. That's the only reason we're all here.
AML. Acute
And you
myeloid.
became very active in the First Mennonite Church in Wadsworth.
Right. I came to Wadsworth in 1955, and historically, I was always a member of the Mennonite General Conference, or the old Mennonites that operated and controlled Goshen College, and for which the Bethel Church up on the hill was one of their...
Not on Mennonite Hill, but on Seville Road.
On Seville Road, right, on the peak of the hill.
Just north of Mennonite Road and south side of the road.
Right, yeah. So we came to Wadsworth in 55 and worshiped up there until 61, and when we get into this church history, you might be able to see the picture, the big picture, a little better. But perhaps I was not as patient as I should have been, and they were not having musical instruments in the church, and we had a son that was going into music, and he wanted to become an organist, and we wanted him to become a church.
The son who was born in Wadsworth.
Born in Wadsworth. Marshall Croyle, yeah.
We didn't hit Marshall yet. We're going to have to, though.
Yeah. Now lives in England. And Mary and I wondered whether we could get this fella into church music with that many negatives there at that time. And so we decided to come over to the First Mennonite Church, then on Treese Road, where they had a musical instrument and so on. And we left the Bethel Church on good terms. We weren't at odds with anybody, and I've gone back many times for hymn sings and funerals and so on, and I love the people at
They're all good friends of ours.
Yes, right. And
those of us who were born in Wadsworth, they were the ones with whom we went to school.
Right, yeah.
Wonderful people.
Yeah, they were the General Conference Mennonites of what First Mennonite became were more liberal. As a matter of fact, one of their slogans, one of the slogans in the General Conference was unity in essentials, liberty in non-essentials, and love in all things.
I like that one.
And yeah, it caught my imagination, and we've been very happy at Treese Road. Yeah. So Marshall, as I said, went to Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York, and became one
of the top schools of music in the country.
Right. And became he majored in organ performance there. Took a master's degree there. Then went to Edinburgh, Scotland, and got a second master's degree because he was getting ready to do a doctoral program, which he never got around to doing because of family obligations and so on. But he's over in North Yorkshire, England now, and he's an organist at a small Anglican church there. And in order to put a better financial base under his little family, he has 2 daughters, 9 and 6. He decided he was tired of doing gigs, musical gigs, which paid him well, but didn't pay him often. And so he finally had to swallow hard and apply to a college of education and get a teaching license.
Well, there are worse things, you know.
Yes, right. As you know.
There are worse things. That's right.
So he's in a teaching program now, and he had the audition to get into the School of Education, and he had hardly finished his number when they said, with your busy schedule, they're being facetious, do you think you could play for 2 commencement performances, commencement exercises on the Ripon campus and 1 over at the York campus, playing on the York Minster Cathedral organ? And he said, I think I could tear myself away. So this really opened the door, and he's doing student teaching now. And Lord willing, he should get a school, or should get placement sometime by next August.
Oh, that'll be good.
Yeah.
That'll be good. He'll love teaching. There's nothing more rewarding, truthfully.
The thing that saved his bacon all these years, Caesar, was his wife was a graphic designer, and she had a pretty good job by British standards. She wasn't paid a lot, but by British standards, it was pretty good. And I remember I was at a Rotary meeting over there one time, and I was sitting beside a dentist and a preacher and a minister, an Anglican priest. And the dentist, the preacher leaned over and said, "What does your daughter do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. She's a graphic artist for Her Majesty's Stationery Office." And the dentist shot, I remember his name was Dr. Dixon, he shot, "Oh, she's got a good job." Anytime you work for the Crown, you know.
Well, it's like the government here.
Yeah, you get a regular paycheck.
I was talking to a young lad this morning who works for the post office. He, just a very fine young man with, I think he has a baccalaureate degree. He has worked for the post office for about 13 years. He has 7 more years, and when he retires, he will make more in his retirement as a post office retiree than I will with having 44 years or 41 years in education with a PhD.
See, there's something unreal about the value system in our country.
But that's the way it is, so God bless him.
I saw on the paper this morning where a ball player for the Yankees signed for $5 million.
You know, your association here with the church, the family, and so forth had to be an extremely, well, I shouldn't say difficult, maybe a crucial might be the better word here, time in your life, making that decision about leaving the Bethel Church and going to the First Mennonite, but you seem to be very, very happy here, and they've accepted you so very well. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you are the historian for the church at the present time, and with that, you're bringing in the history of all of the Mennonite churches. We're so pleased to have you do that for us. Tell us a little bit about the person whom you replaced as a historian, and a little bit about her. I think that she would be a very precious person for us to hear about.
Alice Rohrer. Yeah, she's Arden Rohrer's widow, and she replaced Rachel Kreider, who had been the historian. Rachel moved to Goshen.
And Rachel wrote a book.
Yes, yeah.
Rachel died at 4 o'clock one afternoon. I purchased one of her books on the Mennonite Church at 1 o'clock that afternoon.
Issue number 1.
Well, it was not the first one.
Not the first
one.
No,
but I mean, probably the last one before she died.
No, she's not dead.
Oh, did she not?
No, she's living.
Now, which one is the one who wrote the book on?
Anna Lois Rohrer.
Anna Lois Rohrer. I'm sorry. Yes, that's what this one. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anna Lois Rohrer.
No,
yes.
Rachel's still
living. I'm sorry, Rachel.
Lives.
But Anna Lois Rohrer died at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I bought this book.
And Anna Lois died April the 1st, 1997. I have it written right here.
April 1st, 1997.
Yeah.
And 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Could be.
And I got the book at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
And she wrote this nice little tome or treatise on April 5th of 1982.
Yes.
It was just about 15 years
before she died.
Before she died, yeah.
But tell us a little bit about Arden Rohrer's widow.
Well,
Alice wrote.
Alice is a very conscientious woman. When she makes announcements, we have a sharing time at First Mennonite Church. A tradition that started with Don Steelberg. Don Steelberg started a lot of things.
Sure did.
First Mennonite. And when Alice makes an announcement, it's thorough.
Very thorough.
It's thorough. And she doesn't skimp on the details when she makes an announcement. And I've looked over some of her work in the last 15 years in being archivist and historian, and it is thorough and complete, Caesar.
We wanted her on the program, but unfortunately she retired before.
Yeah,
and
big shoes to follow, and I'm delighted to. I just talked to her Sunday, and I said, Alice, as historian, should I be doing something right now instead of visiting people? She said, yeah, I used to. I said, I hate to, but she said, well, let it pile up, and maybe once a month you can get caught up. And if you get stuck, call on me. I'll bail you out. And that's the kind of a person she is. Alice Narden had a son and a daughter, as I recall, and yeah, she lives up on Wood. Oh, it's that street off of Boyer, off of Oak. Sorry, Alice, I can't think of your street. No, it's you go up Boyer, and Boyer runs into Oak Street here, the jog here, and then Oak Street goes clear up. Brookwood, that's it.
Okay.
Brookwood, Alice.
Brookwood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Alice is a delightful person, as we have many down there. And,
there are some distinctions which are prominent among the three Mennonite churches in Wadsworth. Yeah. Would you be willing to describe some of those distinctions? They are not separations, they're distinctions, I believe.
It's interesting, Caesar. The three churches, Bethel, Maple Hill, and First Mennonite.
And Maple Hill is on the south side of Mennonite Road and the southeast corner of Mennonite and Seville.
Yeah, it was the first of the churches up there. It actually predates our church on Diagonal Road. They built that in 1833.
Diagonal Road?
Yeah, no, Maple Hill built their first church in 1833. 1830. You look surprised, but I think I'm right on my dates.
I think you're right.
And we built ours out there on Diagonal Road in 1853.
And Diagonal Road was Wadsworth Road.
Right, yeah.
We used to call it Diagonal Road, but now it's Wadsworth Road.
In church doctrine, all the churches are the same, believe in the same thing. Unity in essentials. Okay, well, unity
like
in essentials. Liberty in non-essentials. Now, what are some of these non-essentials? Well, the Bethel people historically had an ordinance of foot washing in their communion service. A beautiful symbol. A symbol of
humility.
Service, humility. Yes, you can't wash somebody's feet unless you love them, you know. And this was a big thing. I believe Bethel still washes feet. I'm not sure.
We do in the Catholic Church on Holy Saturday.
Do you? Yeah. Well, it was commanded by our Lord.
We washed 12 sets of feet. And
it was played down in the General Conference Church, and we don't wash feet today, but sometimes I long for a foot washing service. But we don't do it, and so this is liberty in non-essentials. If you want to wash feet, it's all right. If you don't want to wash feet. Baptism, we use the pouring method as the Holy Spirit was outpoured, so we pour and so on. Some people want to be immersed, and we have churches that will accommodate them on immersion, so on. But for about 50 years, Caesar, the Bethel people and the the Maple Hill people
Hill.
sang out of the same book, so to speak, and they loved each other. I'm convinced they loved each other, and they needed each other because they were both small communions, and they really they would intermingle with each other. A lot of social intercourse. If a farmer was sick, why the people would run in and help him, and
chores and food.
Yes,
and
and the women, if somebody was needing help, why the women would help each other, and they shared that cemetery there at Maple Hill. In spite of all the tension that happened between 1870 and 1880, they're lying at peace there in the cemetery, and it's rather symbolic that they're peaceful there. But there were some stormy times, which I'll get into. But I'm convinced that the people loved each other and really needed each other. And unfortunately, this fellow Jacob Whistler was one of these dogmatic, opinionated, conservative fellows, and he was a bishop. And in our church, Caesar, a bishop is almost next to an archbishop in your church. What they say goes, and you don't question too much. And this fella from I think he came from Eastern Pennsylvania. Was so dogmatic and so unyielding, and he had these ideas that he passed on to the people, and the people bought it by and large. They bought it, and to the Bethel people's everlasting credit, I think they bent over backwards in being conciliatory and accommodating. And the Bethel people did not want to split the church. They did not want it. But yet, on the other hand, they didn't want to be pressed into this conservative mold. Bethel people had some enlightened people at that time, and the church, the larger church, was moving into missions, Christian education, Sunday schools, and other outreach and so on. And but this fellow Jacob Whistler was so jealous of the secular influence that the Sunday school movement, as innocent as we think it is today, so concerned that this secular movement would make inroads into their Mennonite fellowship and do violence to it. He was against using the English language. Our young people were clamoring we want, if we have Sunday school, let's have them in English. Other churches have them in English, the Lutherans and the Reforms, and we want our Sunday schools in English. And at the same time, there was this American Sunday School Union. This is a greater organization, and Caesar, they would organize Sunday schools extracurricularly, we'll say, and they'd take the kids over to a clearing somewhere and have a picnic with them, and then they'd play games back in the woods and so on, have a lot of fun, And the church fathers looked with askance at this. Wait a minute, no good can come from this. And in addition to that, Caesar, they had what they called the Boys' Brigade from this American Sunday School Union. This is back in the mid-1800s now. And they had a little marching procession. Well, that hinted of militarism,
You bet.
and we couldn't have put up with that. And they had a little ritual. They had a sort of a slogan or an oath of some kind, and so on. So it was quasi-military, and this just turned them off completely. Number 3, they were afraid that the kids would learn so much in Sunday school that soon they would know more than their parents, that the parents were learning in the German sermons on Sunday morning, and soon they'd look down on in a condescending fashion on their parents. And the church fathers didn't want this. But number 4.
The biggie, huh?
This is the biggie. And it seems so simple and trifling as you think of it today. At that time, they only had worship on alternate Sundays.
As the Amish do now.
Yes, yeah. I guess that's right, Caesar. I'm not sure about the Amish. I would guess that's right. So on alternate Sundays, the church was dark. All right. Caesar, horse and buggy times. Trains were just beginning to be developed in 1850 to 1860. And that off Sunday for these poor farm people was looked forward to probably more than church service. This would give them a chance maybe on Saturday afternoon to hitch up the team, drive down into Wayne County, eat dinner with them, supper, they called it in those days, supper on Saturday evening, stay the night, go to church Sunday morning, Sunday dinner, big dinner, something in Sunday evening, stay all night, and come back to Wadsworth on Monday forenoon. Because they were farmers and life was slow and easy and independent. And these farm families did not want to give up that off Sunday. And the Sunday school movement was going to have Sunday school on the off Sunday and on the on Sunday and the off Sunday every Sunday.
Messed up
the way of life, the way we always did things, you know. Man, these people came over from Europe, you know, and had a lot of these attitudes, states, or these Amish type attitudes, you know. And then they'd sort of spy on each other, you know. The bishop would keep watching the preacher to see that he was towing the line and so on. The story goes that one of the Amish bishops somewhere got a new car, and he had 4 sons. Sunday afternoon, the car was sitting there, and Pop was in reading the Bible or the newspaper or something. And these boys got in this new automobile and took her out for a ride and went up over a rise right at the preacher's house. And man, the phone rang right away. And Bishop, do you know that your boys took that new car of yours and came over the hill here at least 40 miles an hour?
Wow.
The bishop said, you mean that car only did 40 miles an hour? Down at the garage where I bought it, they said it would do 45 or maybe even 50. I'm disappointed. Thanks for calling. That's the kind of humor that went on in those days. But they would sort of look at each other and so on. And I know that a lot of that went on at Maple Hill, and in order to get out of it, some of the fellas picked up and loaded the trailer and took everything they had and headed for Tennessee just to get out of it.
It was really that stern then.
Oh yeah. And when they looked at it, they could see no possibility of the situation changing.
But Maple Hill still has a very ongoing community, does it not?
Yes, yeah. I think they're down to maybe 25 or 30 members. I don't think they have a resident minister at the present time.
They do not?
No. I just talked with Norman Bragg yesterday, and Norman goes around visiting churches, probably been at Sacred Heart. I know he was at our church.
He's been at our place many times.
Norman went to Maple Hill, and I asked Norman, did you see any signs of a Sunday school when you were there? He said, no signs of a Sunday school. And Norman said the preacher, and he didn't know the name, preached a sermon, and Norm said it was sort of a generic type sermon that would have been appropriate in almost any pulpit. Preached a good sermon, and he didn't go off on a lot of baggage like dress and being nonconform to the world and so on. That's the stuff that they used to preach about. Yeah. So here we have this Mennonite movement coming in. The first Bethel people organized in 1832, and as I said, they and the Maple Hill people built that first simple log house of worship on the southeast corner of the corner there of Mennonite and Seville in 1833. And did I say 1832?
32.
1832, yeah. And these two communions worked together for all these years, and then whether it's when you call it the Age of Enlightenment or what, but in the late 1800s, the big rift. I'm trying to use a kind word. The big rift came in that decade between 70 and 80, and to Bethel's everlasting credit, they passed out the olive branch right up to the last minute, because when the break came about 1888 or something like that, why, the Maple Hill people controlled both churches. Their own church, where the Bethel people, the soon-to-be Bethel people worshiped, and the church over at Guilford. And I think, Caesar, they controlled it only because the fella on whose lot or on whose farm that church was built at Guilford probably was a Maple Hiller,
yeah.
a Hillite, and he had the key. And suddenly Bethel found themselves locked out. They had no place of worship. Oh, what do we do? It's about 1887 or 88, and it's far up there to the Guilford church, and besides, now they've locked us out. And so the Guilford church was locked on alternate Sundays. And what shall we do? And they finally went to the Blue School north on Guilford Road. It was a grade school. Or the other choice was the Pleasant Valley School down here in Seville Valley, where that creek goes through, about a mile east of the Maple Hill Church. And so they carried on there for a couple years. And to Bethel's everlasting credit, they sent an emissary twice to make peace. And they said, could we work together? And the old church at Maple Hill was a log church, and it would need to be torn down. Could we work together and build a new church at your location? And they rejected it. They rejected it cold. And Anna Lois chronicles this in her book here. And so finally, Bethel was literally forced to build that first church up on top of the hill in 1894. 1894. To give your viewers, Caesar, some frame of reference, in 1890, the Cleveland Indians built a new ballpark at 66th and Lexington called League Park.
League Park.
That was built in 1891. So it was just about this time. I just point that out to show you what's going on in other parts of the community. But in 1894, then, Bethel built this little church, 50 by 72, I believe it was, up there, where the present church sits now. And they the Guilford church was closed to them. But through some devious manner, Caesar, somebody got a key.
I was thinking to myself all the time, somebody's going to get a key to that
Somebody
place.
got a key, and on the alternate Sunday, they unlocked the front door and went in there and had a worship service. And then after that, why, Maple Hill would let them. It was just one of those kraut-headed dogmatic, bullheaded ideas that they just wouldn't give up.
Well, you know, those are the kinds of things, unfortunately, that occur in just about any organization.
Yeah.
It's not the philosophy of the organization so much as it is the people who interpret the philosophy of the organization that causes the rift.
I guess so.
And it's too bad, but one of the things that I think is significant from an outsider's point of view, had you not told us this, no one in Wadsworth would know.
I guess not.
Because they are such a peaceful, loving people.
Yeah.
All of them. And they are so professional about their dirty wash, as it were.
Yes.
And never do you hear anything about that. You know, the one thing that I think is significant here is that you can talk about this and intellectualize the whole process, and I doubt seriously if anyone could ever be offended by what you say.
I hope not.
It's historical.
I almost prayed about this, Caesar. Fortunately, there won't be any Maple Hill people see this tape.
No, they won't, because they don't watch television.
But I told my wife, whatever I do, I want to be charitable and loving and with a Christian, a wholesome Christian attitude.
Indeed you have.
Because I could sit back and gloat and a dumb way of doing things, look what we do now. But I don't want to do that, and I don't have that attitude. I love those people. I had some of them for patience, and we'd talk in the office about serious things, and one of their young fellas talked to me about wanting to go on the mission field. But he said, I've got to go to college. And I said, well, Willis, I'm not telling you what to do. His name's Willis Hurst. I'm not telling you what to do. I know Willis Hurst. Because I don't want to be caught in a crossfire here. But you do what you have to do, and you know where my heart is. And so he left Maple Hill and went up and joined the Bethel Church about 30 years ago, probably, and then went to Goshen College and got a bachelor's degree and took some Bible school and so on. Today he's a missionary in Formosa, Argentina.
And Formosa, Argentina.
Formosa, Argentina.
Yes, and they've been having some difficulties there just recently.
Have they? I write
not the Mennonites. I don't mean that, but there were some. Well, that's where the earthquake was it not?
Let's see, the earthquake was not in Argentina, I don't believe. It was one of the other ABC countries.
No. But I knew
I'm not sure.
the word Formosa.
Maybe in Ecuador.
Yeah. You know, could you relate just a little bit of the personnel who were prominent in some of the? Now you mentioned this one bishop. But what about some of the other people? We do know that Ephraim Huntsberger was a minister.
Yeah.
How was he involved here?
Well, do you want me to repeat the things that I
Some of those things, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they dovetail with what you talked about today.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that during this maelstrom up on the hill, the first Mennonite people just did their own thing and sort of kept their mouths shut and did their and had their church as they planned. Ephraim was a godly man. Came over here from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, at the request of the early Mennonite settlers in Wadsworth, and he was born in 1814, I believe, and came here, talked German, and preached in German, and preached in their homes, and was the pastor of the little flock when they broke ground on Wadsworth Road and built a little crackerbock church out there.
Which is no longer there.
Not there. Cemetery's there now.
Geographically, where is it?
Well, it's located right across the entrance to the present Wadsworth Rittman Hospital. That's where it is. Yeah. That's where it was.
Yeah.
Cemetery is still there, but everything else is gone. Well, what else can we talk about?
Well, I wanted to ask a question about a little bit more of the genesis. Why did the people come from Pennsylvania to western Wadsworth?
All right. Caesar, in 1800, there was a knockdown, drag-out depression in the United States. And Anna Lois talks about it, and she says the depression lasted longer than the War of 1812. Now, we usually look for wars to jack up the economy and get things going again, but she says it went on beyond the War of 1812.
So it's at least 12 years, maybe 14.
Yes, right. And it was a knockdown, drag-out depression. And this caused, and Anna Lois says that a lot of the industrial cities in the East were dark because they were dead. And there was a lot of immigration. Anna Lois says in her book here that at one checkpoint, to show you how flourishing the immigration movement, at one checkpoint in Pittsburgh, spelled with Pittsburg. They didn't put the H on until the early 1900s, I think. At one checkpoint, 236 wagons went past there in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
236 wagons and 600 merino sheep. Now, I don't know, that must be a particular...
M-E-R-I-N-O.
Yeah, M-E-R-I-N-O.
Yeah, merino sheep are a special brand of sheep.
Merino sheep, yeah. And so that's how flourishing. That's a couple. That's 3 or 4 an hour.
Yes. Why did they come to Wadsworth, though? We have a huge contingent of Pennsylvania Dutch here in Wadsworth. Why did they come to Wadsworth? What was so inviting?
Yeah, somebody must have scouted out the territory. Now, Anna Lois says the first start of anything around here was in 1832, which I mentioned, and there must have been a lot of available farmland. In those days, farms is what attracted Mennonites.
That's right.
Farms, and so the word got around, and they sent delegations, just like they used to send delegations over to Russia to check out the Ukraine before Catherine II invited them over there, and so somebody came out and gave a good report. Land is cheap, and
good quality.
A fellow by the name of Jacob Leatherman came out here, and with his brother had $300, and to show you what attracted people, his brother had $300 in his pocket. He paid $220 for 107.5 acres of land up in the River Styx. It was probably woods. And my calculator told me that's $2.04 an acre.
I wonder if there would be any developer out there who would give him 300. 407 acres would be 303 million probably.
And Caesar, people were so eager to emigrate from the Depression and
go this way.
It looked better out here in Medina County. No. That they sold their farms sometimes at tremendous losses. Anna Lois talks about somebody buying a farm for $6,900 and selling it for $6,900 and sold it for something like $1,500.
Wow.
And lost over $5,000 in Pennsylvania. That's how anxious they sold their farms at a loss.
Now this next question is going to be one that's going to be difficult to answer because there may not be an answer to it, but it has always occurred to me. The Pennsylvania Dutch, by your terms and by others, simple, conservative, and I guess hardworking. Well, the hardworking doesn't in any way cause me any problem. But these people came from Germany. Yeah. The Germans are extremely creative in their ingenuity.
Yes, yeah.
They are not a simplified people. I mean, they have pomp, they have circumstance, they have all this other kind of thing.
Caesar,
Why?
let me correct one thing, though. A lot of them came from Switzerland. Lots, a lot of these farmers came from Switzerland.
Well, possibly too, but you know that whole European scene was filled with pomp, with circumstance, with gallantry and warmongers and things like that. What caused them to change this whole thing?
Well, in the Mennonite psyche, historically, there was something godly about working with the soil. The soil comes from God, and we've got to treat it with respect.
I think that's a European attitude. My parents felt the same way.
Is that right? It might be.
My parents, my father used to tell us all the time, don't ever take your hands out of the soil. That's where you came from.
Yeah, and because of that tremendous respect for the soil and that work ethic that they had, why it was just natural to emigrate somewhere where there are cheaper farms and get a new start, and they had no problem adjusting to a new farm somewhere, and Anna Lois says that some of them were as poor as church mice.
Oh, sure.
But a couple years, they'd put body and soul together and come out on top.
But despite the fact that there was a lot of gallantry and pomp and circumstance there, the one thing that I think probably motivated them to counter that was the warmongering attitude of the Europeans.
Yes, that's what drove them out of Europe, certainly. Yeah.
And any time that we do something which is contrary to what we want, then we go the other extreme.
Sure.
And I just wonder if that might have been a...
They were warmongered out of Europe, and they had a friend in William Penn in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Oh boy, he was like a savior for them too. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the Amish don't have a mustache as a result of was it Kaiser Wilhelm having had a mustache, and that's why they don't have buttons either. I believe I've heard that.
The buttons, they use hooks and eyes instead of buttons because buttons at one time had a military connotation.
Military connotation.
They were on the military uniform.
So it was a defense against all these other kinds of things, a retaliation, a resentment against it that caused them. And the resentment caused these people to bring a legacy to Ohio, which has been one of the stars as far as I'm concerned personally, and I'm a Roman Catholic, as you well know. But I look at the Mennonites in our community, and I think that they are the types of people who really profess what it is that Christianity is supposed to be doing. They're a wonderful group of people, and we're grateful for that opportunity. Equally, Dr. Croyle, we're grateful for your having presented it to us because at one time the entire western part of Wadsworth was of this ilk.
Right.
I mean, there were a few Luthers and so forth, but they were the Mennonites and so forth. And we're unfortunately we're out of time, but we want to say to all of those Mennonite brethren, even though they can't watch this program, we want them to know that their legacy will always be a very vital part of Wadsworth, and you have made it alive for us, and we're so grateful to you for it.
Freeman, Caesar, thank you very much for putting that cap sheaf on. I'm glad you said that.
Well, I think that it's a very, very...
And you and I are in complete agreement with that. We love those people, and
they're good people.
We wish them well.
1 minute left, but I want to quickly get Marshall. Tell us more about Marshall.
Oh, well, he's a church organist.
Yes,
and
but he was a prodigy.
Yeah. He early on we sensed that he was going to be special. He'd hop on the piano bench and play the kids' music for them.
And as a matter of fact, probably one of the finest musicians to come out of Wadsworth.
Well, we've had some good ones.
That'd be very fine. We're pleased for that. And one other quick thing, grandchildren. We haven't talked about those.
We have 9 grandchildren,
Just name them quickly, if you will.
Emma and Olivia are in North Yorkshire, England, with their parents. Dave, Stephen, John, and Christina are Weldies, W-E-L-D-Y, from Napanee, Indiana, my son-in-law. They're from Mattaway, Portage County. Let's see. Next is Phil has a son, Aaron, who lives with his mother.
A-A-R-O-N or E-R?
A-A-R-O-N, yeah, boy. a senior and has been accepted to the University of Florida. He wants to study engineering.
Good.
And has been invited into the honors dormitory.
The honors dormitory, that's wonderful.
And Warren is the engineer over at Goodyear. Warren has 3 kiddos, Ryan, Matthew, and Megan.
Good.
Megan's a little blonde.
I just saved your life, because if you would not have mentioned your grandchildren, you would have been dead meat by now. Thank you again for coming. We're over time. Thank you.
My pleasure, Caesar.